Good morning, Smarter News. We are going to get you ready after a long holiday weekend with a few big news stories. We're going to start here at home, we're going to go overseas, and then we're going to come back here. So a couple big stories to watch: the economy, what's happening in Afghanistan, and a new law in Texas that's getting a lot of attention. So first things first, something kind of passed us by going into the holiday weekend, and that's the jobs report. And I think it's always important to mention what's happening with the job market, because as we're watching the job market recover, that is paralleling in some ways the economic recovery overall when we look at what's happened over the last 2 years now due to the pandemic. I want to show you a chart that gives us an idea of what the job market looks like before I get to some of those numbers. So you can see here, this is the unemployment rate, and you can start in August 2019, you see it low, 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 and then that huge spike when the economy shut down due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I drew that yellow line because you can see that the unemployment rate has declined. We're going in the right direction, but the purple line is showing us where we were before everything started. So although there was a decline, we're still not back to full recovery. And that's what we really want to see. Let me show you something else just so you can have another idea. It's always good just to kind of have a visualization of this. Oh, actually, this was supposed to be my first screen, but I thought that little exploding head was a good kind of visual for what happened during the shutdown, how severe the shutdown was for the unemployment picture in America. So what you should know about Friday's report is that it was lower than expected, showed lower than expected job growth. And the jobs report is all a game of expectation. So yes, the numbers matter, but what happens is the government releases their data, and if it meets the expectations of economists, then that is viewed as positive news. When it misses expectations, that's viewed as negative news. And what happened in the August report that we just got, it showed that we missed expectations. So only 235,000 jobs were created. Economists were looking for 700,000 plus. And so what that signaled to some economists was that, hey, listen, this recovery is not going to be a straight line. We're going to see some jagged peaks and valleys. And that's important because they're looking at economic policy at the back half of the year. You know, what will economic policy look like from the government to either help or hurt this recovery? So big thing you should know is, hey, the unemployment rate continues to go down. We're still seeing job production. It's just not at the pace that economists expected. And what was the slowdown? Why did that happen? In hospitality, restaurants, travel. This area that was really kind of recovering quickly because people were back and moving around. Economists say, hey, the Delta variant concerns about the pandemic slowed down some of that hiring in that particular area. And then you actually see that in the jobs report. So just something that you should know, we all share in the economy. And in fact, we know the US economy is the strongest economy in the world. So what happens here with the job market affects us all over the world. So that's a good transition, right? No matter what government you're in, no matter where you are in the planet, the economy matters to the people. And that's something, by the way, that the Taliban are going to have to deal with. So I want to show you what's actually happening overseas in Afghanistan. Big thing you should know. We have our Secretary of State, we have our Defense Secretary traveling to the Middle East to thank our allies for support during the evacuation that took place over the last several weeks from Afghanistan. In the meantime, what you're seeing here is the Taliban meeting with some representatives from China. So they are hosting foreign ministers coming and meeting as the relationships are building from the Taliban onward. There's all these concerns in Afghanistan about the economy as well. You're seeing huge lines at banks. We're seeing, people wanting to take money out of the banks because of the uncertainty. One of the things I want to show you here, though, is something else that's taking place in Afghanistan at this time. This is video of a protest taking place. And sometimes this protest is being described as anti-Pakistan protests. Some of it's described as anti-regime protests against the Taliban. We've talked about the relationship between the Taliban and Pakistan. It's perceived that Pakistan protects the Taliban. And so people are taking to the streets in Afghanistan, this is in Kabul, to protest what's happening there. That's a lot of courage in the streets. What we may not get to see in this video, and you're not going to hear this sound over the Instagram Live, is that there's gunshots fired to try to disperse the crowd. And one of the reasons that we know that this is actually taking place, thank you to Tolo News, you're going to see people scatter here. This is when the gunfire is being fired into the air to disperse the crowd. We know that this is happening because we have a friend there, Holly McKay. Holly McKay is a journalist that we've worked with over the last several weeks. She is back in Kabul, and she's going to be doing reports from us from Kabul. This is a photograph that she just posted today. You could follow her at Holly S. McKay. So that you can follow along with her reporting from the ground in Kabul. But these are people that she said took to the streets to protest what's happening. Some of you asked questions about what's actually going on with the plane. We were hearing about planes being stopped by the Taliban, not allowed to leave with Americans on it. Here's the deal. There's multiple reports on this at this time. You have one high-profile Republican congressman saying that there were 6 planes that were stopped and that people were being trapped and held hostage. You have reports coming from a anonymous Afghan official that is saying that no, it's 4 planes, and the reason why they were stopped is that the people didn't have papers. Here's the problem with when you evacuate, when you don't have a government presence on the ground, is that there's no one that's from the U.S. government representing us there to really tell us what's going on. Secretary Blinken made a comment while overseas saying it's his understanding that people without proper valid paperwork are not allowed to leave. But how many people we're talking about, the exact number of planes, all of that we don't really know. And we do know that some of the meetings that are taking place with the Taliban, Turkey, Qatar, for example, are looking at getting airport operations restarted smoothly in Kabul for international flights. Some of those flights in question were actually from a different city that was looking to have planes take off from. So Mazar al-Sharif, that's where Holly was reporting from us earlier. So that's away from Kabul. That's an airport where some of these planes reportedly were not allowed to leave. So there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of different reports. And the important thing to know is that I don't see on the schedule right now, the White House, the president's going to be traveling to look at the damage in the Northeast due to the hurricane here. It looks like there's going to be a press gaggle on the plane where, the press can ask questions. You have the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense traveling. So sometimes when that happens, you don't necessarily have a briefing, but we'll watch for that for the State Department or Defense Department. So I'm going to be looking for any really on the record commentary from the American government about exactly what we know happening there. And quite frankly, we just don't have anything at this time. So I want to be perfectly clear about that. A lot of mixed reports. Okay, let's talk about a big law. I'm going to go back here at home. A big law that went into effect in Texas, an abortion law. What I'm going to do with this topic is that it's really important to have the right historical context for some of the legislation that we're seeing from multiple states, not just Texas, but multiple states when it comes to altering existing abortion law in those states. And because I think that context is really important, I'm going to give you some broad strokes here for the Texas law, but I expect to do a longer report for you that's specifically on this topic. So here's the big things that you should know about the Texas abortion law. Texas passed a law back in the spring. It went into effect on September 1 last week. And despite legal challenges to the law, the Supreme Court and others did not stop it from taking into effect. So what does this law actually do? This law effectively stops or halts abortion after a heartbeat could be detected, activity of a heartbeat, which, by the way, is not necessarily a precise time depending on who you talk to. It's commonly being discussed as the 6-week part in the pregnancy. So Texas put forward what has been discussed in other states as a heartbeat bill. And this went into effect. In other states, though, it's been stopped because of legal challenges. So why? Why did the Texas law stand? Why is the Texas law in effect? Well, it has to do with the enforcement mechanism. Texas law did something different. To enforce this law, what the Texas law says is that anybody that's helping a woman get an abortion after this point in the pregnancy, you could be someone that's driving the woman to a procedure. You could be the doctor performing the procedure. You could actually be sued. And that's the enforcement mechanism. So it's different than like a police officer showing up at a clinic door, for example, right? It's a different enforcement mechanism. And there's a question about how this is exactly going to work, which is why, one of the reasons why the Supreme Court said, the very last minute, we're going to let this law stand because we're actually not sure exactly how this is going to be enforced. And remember, the Supreme Court is very careful about how they step into state law. It doesn't mean that this law isn't going to be challenged in the Supreme Court. It just meant right now the Supreme Court allowed the law to stand. It doesn't mean the Supreme Court believes in the constitutionality of it. Just was saying, well, wait, let's see how this is actually going to be enforced. So that's the big thing you should know about the Texas law that is in effect right now. There's a lot of debate about it, obviously, from all sides. And the big news this weekend is the Department of Justice came out and said, basically, they're going to use a law to protect what they say protects people's right to access an abortion if they're being intimidated or threatened in any way. So how the federal government, again, may may look to enforce that law to protect citizens versus how the state is going to enforce their law is a big question mark. So we're already seeing some ripple effects to this. We're already seeing, obviously, a lot of debate, and we'll have more on this law in a separate report. I think it's really important, again, to look at the background for abortion law in America. A lot of times what we think about current law and what is the truth about current law and how it stands is different. I've encountered that in my reporting, so I want to make sure we have firm footing, because this is going to be a very big story, one to watch. And because the Texas law was allowed to stand, other states with Republican legislatures are looking to see, could they pass similar laws and therefore restrict access to abortion in their states. So it has, it's a very layered story, and one that deserves a little more time. So more on that. By the way, it's interesting, if you look at, obviously everyone knows Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade was a case centered in Texas, and so here we are full circle again, talking about another Texas abortion law in a different way. So more on that. Real quick here, just as we finish up, thought it was interesting. One of the big headlines today, I'm sure you might see if you have the radio on, television on, a lot of talk of First Lady Jill Biden going back to work. She's going back to teach in a classroom. And some are describing this as the first lady in American history to work outside of the White House. So she'll be employed by somebody else. And so I'm curious about that. Does that mean all the other first ladies didn't work? No, they had full-time jobs at the White House, and a lot of first ladies assumed a lot of different roles. So this is just sort of like an interesting thing to note about First Lady Jill Biden returning to the classroom. Apparently, according to the Associated Press, she makes the Secret Service dress like college students so that they sort of blend in. I don't know if that works, but you see some big guys, carrying backpacks, maybe. I don't know. Anyways, guys, that was kind of an interesting part in American history. I'm going to have to look deeper into that to really be sure. First lady to work outside of the White House, and, back in the classroom, like so many kids today. All right, guys, have a great day. More on all these stories on our website. More on the Texas abortion law coming up in a special report. And questions and comments, let me know. And as always, more on smartnews.com. Have a great day.